Hey there, Diane with Complete Marketing Systems. We're halfway through. This is number 6. Number 6 in Diane's Definite Dozen. Diane'sDozen.com. This one is something that I love. It is always about continual learning, continually studying, continuing to study your craft, and not only your craft, but what others are doing, right? So from a sports perspective, this is a pretty simple thing because we're always watching film. We're always going back and looking at statistics. We're always going back and looking at form. We're always going back and looking at nutrition. We're constantly looking at how do we get better, right? How do we get 1% better every day, every game, every time we step foot on the court, the field? How do we get 1% better? We do it by studying the game, studying the sport, studying the movement, studying physiology, studying, nutrition. All of those things come into play in sport. Well, that translates really easily over into what we do in our business, right? Because if you're not continually studying, if you're not growing and learning, there's always new things happening. Now, let me do the caveat because I know somebody's saying this. Yeah, but Diane, business is business. Well, that in and of itself, right, isn't true. But the foundation is the same, right? The baseline of what you have to build upon is the same. And you're right. But you have to have that foundation in order to build a solid business, right? In order to grow your business, in order to scale your business, you've got to have the foundation. And the foundation comes from learning and studying. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to jump in on every new thing that happens in your business or in the industry or in business in general, right? You don't have to be an early adopter, if you will, in order to be very, very successful, but you do have to study. You do have to see what's the competition doing. What are people in other industries doing that no one in mine is, right? One of the biggest mistakes people make in business is they do what everyone else is doing in their industry. Well, you just look like everyone else. Go see what somebody outside of your industry is doing. Maybe in a completely different industry. Maybe in something that's related. But you'll be surprised how many times you can take something that you learn in those situations or from somebody who's in a different industry and apply it in some way to your business. What does that do? Well, it gives you something no one else in your industry has, at least for a little while, right? And it gives you the edge. It gives you the ability to be and look different and offer something different or in a different way, right? And so this whole piece of, look, I've got 8 double-sided bookshelves in my house. And I'll tell you real quickly a funny story. When I moved from Atlanta to Lexington, I spent a year in Lexington many years ago now. I had 56 boxes of books. And when we got to Lexington I was asking the movers to put certain things in certain rooms, one of the guys who was carrying in most of the boxes of books said to me, Diane, what's in these? And I said, well, it says on the outside it's books. He said, that's really what's in them? I said, yeah. And he said, you can get all these for free. I said, what do you mean? He goes, online. I said, you can't get those books. He said, what are you talking about? I said, open one of those boxes. And he looked at me, right? I said, it's okay. I'm not going to make you read a book. Just open it. So he opened the box. He had this box cutter. And he opened the box. I said, pull out a book. And he looked at me again. I said, just pull one out. He said, any one. I said, yeah, any book. Because what prompted this was he asked me if I'd read all of these books. And I said about 85 or 90% of them. He didn't believe me. So he pulled out one of the books, and I said, open it. He's like, why? I said, just open it. Skim through it. And as he skimmed through it, he saw little yellow stickies. He saw dog-eared pages. He saw yellow highlights. He saw red ink with circles and lines and notes written in places. And he goes, they all look like this? I said, yeah. I said, that's why I told you can't buy these books just anywhere, because you can't. They're books that I have studied. I don't just read. I study. I'm a studier, right? You should take notes and write notes. I don't do that anymore. It's time consuming, but it helps me learn and retain. Here's my point. I had a mentor say to me once, Diane, you don't ever need to read another sales or marketing book. And she was right. And he was right. I've had multiple people tell me that. They're right. But I do. Why? Because if I can take one thing out of a 200-page book, a 400-page book, a 600-page book, one thing that makes me an extra, add a zero or add a one at the front, right? Or makes an extra sale or whatever it is, right? Then it's worth the $30 I spent for the book and the 5 hours I spent reading it. Why? Because I can use what I learn and what works over and over and over again. When you stop learning, you start to die. I remember that quote when I think I saw that when I was in college, and it has always stuck with me. When you stop learning is when you start to die. Think about that, right? When you stop learning is when your business starts to die. Because there's always a new something, right? A new strategy, a new technique, and sometimes it lasts and sometimes it doesn't. You know, artificial intelligence, AI, was relatively new about a year ago. It wasn't, it had been around for a long time, but the masses got a hold of it about a year ago or so ago, right? I think it'll be around for a while. Certain other things have come and gone. We changed the name of things to make them seem sexier. But the point I'm trying to make is, if you stop learning about those new things, then you're way behind the 8 ball. You become a relic. You know, it's interesting when I talk to young people, they sometimes say, well, Diane, why do I want to work with somebody who's in their 60s? Right? Well, because I have all this experience, for one. And for two, Ryan Dice once, I'll never forget this, I'm pretty sure it was Ryan, that, or maybe, no, it was Russell Brunson, I'm sorry. That maybe it was both of them. It doesn't matter. That he would only work with a coach or a mentor who had crashed and lost and then come back. Why? Because you know, if somebody loses it all and can rebuild it, that they're continuing to learn, that they're growing, that they can do it over and over and over again. Now, hopefully they're not losing more than once, but sometimes you do with the longevity of business. But you have to be not on the cutting edge, but you have to be aware. You have to know. You have to be able to talk to your client base about the things that they need to know and the things that they need to be using. And that's true whether you're selling cars or you own a business or you're an athlete. But I think I really got that, and I get it from, from the whole watching film and looking at, analyzing my swing, analyzing the pitcher's pitch, where to pick it up and how to know which ball is which pitch, all of those things. I'm reading a book right now by Dawn Staley, and she talks about, like, learning the game and going out and shooting and getting tips and all of that, right? That's study. That's continuing to grow. That's how you do it. The players who shoot 50 or 100 free throws at the end of practice when they're tired become the best free throw shooters. Why? Because if they can do it in a situation where you're tired and exhausted, first of all, that's real life. That's a real game situation. But you can certainly make a free throw at the beginning of the game when you're fresh, right? And so you have to develop a habit of practicing like you're going to play. Same thing in business. Same thing in business. So keep learning. Keep reading. Again, it's so easy these days. So many things online. You don't have to really buy a book or buy an audio. You can do it pretty much. There's whole books that you can read now and available. One of them is Happy Pocket Full of Money, which I would highly recommend. If you haven't read, go read it. But that's not what this is about. So, number 6, keep learning. Keep studying. Not only for you and for what you're doing, but look at what other people are doing. And not always people in your industry, people outside, people who have great businesses that you admire. One of the places I love to go are cruises, because they're such great marketers. They have such great marketing on the ships. I always learn something. All right? That's it for today. Make it a great day. Until next time. And by the way, if you want a copy of Diane's Dozen, just go to dianesdozens.com, and they're right there. It's right there for you. Talk to you soon.